Okay. I believe we are all here. Thank you all for coming. Today, this is the last of the Beauty and Messiness on a Sadhaka's Journey series that I will be hosting. Thankfully, Archana City is going to take over again next week. So today we have the good fortune, I'm very excited to have Bhrigupada Prabhu here. Bhrigupada Prabhu, as most of you know, he's been giving several classes. He gave really nice series on Manashiksha, on Yoga Sutra, recently, just the other day, on Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And I've always appreciated him as a kind of the devotee that I would like to be, a discriminating yet deeply devotional person. And so I will start by just reading a little bit of his bio that he sent. So Bhrigupada Das was born in 1973 in an academic middle-class family in Turku, Finland. He came in contact with Krishna Consciousness in his teens, moving into the Helsinki temple in 1992. He has been practicing Krishna Consciousness since then with little success, he says, even after having come in contact with Guru Maharaj around the year 2000. By Krishna's and Guru's grace, he is married to the artist Saragrahi Dasi, and they have a beautiful and talented daughter, Radha, and a fun dog named Frodo. Bhrigu lives in Turku and works at the local university teaching religious studies. Jai. Welcome, Bhrigupada Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, starting from there, as is generally our kind of format, we're discussing the heroic journey of a sadhaka. So, we'd like to hear today about your life, starting with, do you feel like there were any significant events in your early life? Tell us about your early life.
Thank you. Yes, I do feel there are some significant events, and I think it's one of the things maybe you start to realize when you get a little bit older, coming into the middle part of life, that you start to realize how much in your life really is dependent on your background. When I was young, I was thinking that the world is open and I can be and do whatever I want to, but we're conditioned in so many different ways. I grew up in a middle class family, an academic family. My parents were both working at the university where I work now. My mother was a professor, my father was an administrator. Our family.
What did your mother teach?
Gender studies. My family is similar in one way to Kamalaksha's family. My background is a little bit similar to Kamalaksha's. We both belong to the Swedish-speaking minority of Finland, which basically means that we have kind of privileged backgrounds. I have most of the privileged points that you can kind of collect in this world at this particular historical phase. I'm a white hetero male growing up in a family where my parents were not particularly rich, but I never had to worry about whether somebody is how to pay the rent or things like that. I was given the chance to, when I went to study, to basically study whatever I wanted. Religious studies not being a big cash cow or anything like that. So that's a huge privilege, that I had this kind of freedom to basically do what I wanted. And something that in many ways was very useful for my Krishna consciousness. Of course, Krishna consciousness isn't dependent on karma, but having a good karma can make things in some ways easier. Anyway, so I grew up in this middle-class family, academic family, which was also a very secular family. So religion wasn't really a part of my growing up, except that my grandmother was a devout Christian. She didn't live here in the city. She lived in the countryside. My father came from the countryside. So in her place, I got to kind of know Christianity in the sense that she would pray, she would teach me the evening prayer. She had these delightful illustrated Bible books with all these stories of Daniel and David and Goliath and all these kind of exciting stories. And somehow, even though I didn't grow up in a religious family, or maybe because of that, I had a religious interest even as a child. I was really interested in learning about these kind of stories about gods and saints and so on. I remember getting bullied by my class friends for having read the Bible in school once, just because I thought it was so fascinating with all these like strange persons living till they were a 900-year-old or something like that. So I had this kind of interest as a kid. Not very serious, but still some kind of interest. And I came in contact with Krishna consciousness first, I think when I was like 16 or something like that. I took a course at the school, and on a table somebody had forgotten the science of self-realization, which in Swedish, which is my mother tongue, and the book was in Swedish. The title of that book is translated into something like The Guidance of a Master, en mästarledning, which was a really cool title. Who wouldn't like to have this kind of master, this kind of wise person who guides you? And the book itself, of course, is very attractive. There's all these interviews with John Lennon, and George Harrison is there, and Prabhupada's letters, and it's such a good book.
And
yeah, it's such a good book. Yeah, so I loved it, and I remember discussing it with my friends there, and they were also like, yeah, that's interesting, karma. And then at the beginning of the book, like it's always in the BBT books, if you're interested in the topic of this book, you can contact the secretary. So I actually did that. I don't know how many people actually do that, but I wrote down the address, and I sent off a letter, a very silly letter. I had big questions. I remember one of my questions was that you guys are against intoxicants, but how come you're using incense? Because somehow I had this impression that incense is some kind of drug or something. Finland was quite backwards in that. So I had that question, and I think I also asked about kids. Do your kids get to choose how they want to live their life? And kind of like teenager questions. So I got an answer then eventually. It took quite some time, but I got an answer, and they mentioned that they gave some answers to the questions, and then they said that actually we have a temple in your hometown, and they gave the address. And I was a very kind of insecure, shy kid. So going to some place with people I didn't know, that was probably some kind of cult, was a very scary proposition. But there was something that was pulling me there. So I went and checked out that place. It was like a storefront temple, not exactly downtown, but still walking distance. And I saw that this is the place. They had an advertisement for, they had a Saturday lunch program, but I didn't dare go in. I went home again. I went there a second time, still couldn't muster up the courage to go in. But the third time I went in, and the first person who met me in the door said, "Oh, you must be Måns Bro." And I thought, he must have some kind of mystical power. Until I realized that, of course, they had shared the letter that there's this guy, this boy that interested. So I got interested in Krishna consciousness and started visiting the temple fairly regularly. First with a friend of mine who was also interested a little bit in Eastern philosophy. He was into Buddhism for a time. But then more on my own. And I think, thinking back about it right now, the thing that kind of struck me was two things. One was that the place felt like coming home in some way. Like I really liked I remember how warm and kind of like literally warm the place was. And how nice the people were, but also that it was quite demanding. One of the first things somebody asked me was that, "So, do you eat meat?" One brahmachari, he popped a question like that. And I said, "Well, I live at home, so my mom is cooking and she's sometimes making meat." "You shouldn't eat meat." Really kind of blunt, heavy preaching like that, which wasn't very nice. And this is something I've been thinking about since hearing Guru Nishta's wonderful interview, where he spoke a lot about how many of the kind of big advancements or big leaps forward in his spiritual life have been characterized by suffering in some way, or anxiety, or it's been difficult. For me, it's also like that. Many of the kind of big things in my life have been really difficult. And that was maybe the first thing, like, oh, if I want to be in this group, I'm going to have to change my life. That's not an easy proposition if you're 16 and unsecure and kind of a wimp, which I still am. So, but I realized, okay, this is what I have to do. So, okay. So I told my mom and dad that I'm going to be a vegetarian. They thought it was a terrible idea. My father thought that this is some kind of hippie stuff, that what's this about non-violence? You're always violent. Even if you eat a cabbage, there's going to be some insects on it. And my mom, who is a very kind of dramatical person, very kind of level-headed person, she became really emotional and, "Oh, you're not going to eat my food anymore." It was hard to become a vegetarian as a kid, but the thing was that when I actually did that very quickly, it was a big experience for me, because I was as I said, a very kind of insecure person, and suddenly I could do something which nobody supported. Being vegetarian in those days, like 1990, was quite rare in Finland. But when I decided I could do it, and that gave me a lot of confidence, self-confidence as a kid, that I can do things my own way. So
was you said you had a friend who was also interested for a little while. Did you have any friends like who pursued it like you did?
No, not at all.
So were you kind of on your own, like being a vegetarian? And
yeah, I think there was a girl in my school who was vegetarian. I thought she was really flaky and weird. So it was really kind of going into uncharted territory. And afterwards, I've thought about this, that what if I had met some other group with kind of the similar kind of close-knit group that was welcoming of new members and this kind of feeling of becoming a part of something bigger? What if it had been like a neo-Nazi group or something like that? I might have been attracted to that as well, but I did have this religious interest. So I don't think it was simply that this was the persons I kind of first came across. Because I did also like the fact that they were so strange, the devotees, that they really had the courage to be different, walk around in bed sheets and eat different food, sing different songs, do everything completely differently, but have the courage to do that and also have the kind of some kind of backing for it from scriptures and Sanskrit was super impressive when somebody could say a Sanskrit verse from the Gita. I thought that was amazing. So for me, becoming a devotee was also really, sorry, I've just finished this.
Yeah,
was also really a big part of kind of finding my own identity somehow. Growing up.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. It sounds like you're kind of identifying these characteristics in the devotees you met that accompanied with the religious aspect, but it was also like that confidence you talk about. It was also bringing that out of you as a shy person, as a kind of introverted kid. It sounds like meeting the devotees also, their personalities kind of brought some of that out of you and a little more confidence to be who you wanted to be on your own, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. But I had this kind of feel from the beginning with the devotees that this path is a demanding path. So the first thing was the vegetarianism. The second thing after that was giving up alcohol. I mean, I wasn't a junkie or anything like that, but alcohol was a big part of youth culture, of course, in those days as well. So giving that up, I remember being afraid of, if I stop drinking, what will all my friends think? Will they still like me, basically? Well, they did. So that wasn't as big thing as I thought it would be. But then when I had finished school and I was 18, I realized that there's no alternatives. I just need to join the temple, becoming a monk, and this will be my last life in this material world. And I had a big discussion with my parents. It was emotional. They hated the idea, but they were wise enough to realize that let's not try to forbid him or anything. Let him try this thing, and we'll see what happens. I remember leaving their place, crying and thinking that I will never see them again. I'm going to move into the monastery. A teenage boy with this kind of romantic idea of becoming a sannyasi or something. So I joined the temple.
So was it like, do you feel like it was a pull of attraction towards what you'd had discovered, or was it kind of the other way, like there weren't any prospects, you weren't interested in pursuing like some people join right after high school or like that, like I did, because college was like, I don't see the point in going to college then.
Well, no, it wasn't so much that. I think it was more the pull of Krishna consciousness and the pull of the devotees. Feel really that there's nothing else in this world that's worth doing. Very kind of idealistic kind of feel. My parents wanted me to study and so on, but I felt that why would I do that? That's just wasting my time. the real welfare work that I can do is
Yeah.
spreading Krishna consciousness. So after maybe 1 or 2 weeks in the temple, I remember in the beginning being so wiped out with tiredness all the time, just from having to get up so early and falling asleep while doing the dishes and things like that. I went out on book distribution. In those days in ISKCON Finland, there were basically 2 alternatives. Either you could be a book distributor, or then you could be like in the support troops. And
You mean
being in the
supporting the
support,
book distributors?
yeah, supporting the book distribution, and that really was like a third-class devotee. So it was book distribution, or then you're a loser, basically. So I went on to book distribution, and that was good for me. It was really good for me, because it forced me to become more self-confident. It also forced me to read Prabhupada's books really carefully, because it was so scary being out there on the streets. So when you got the time to kind of sit down and read, I really read with devotion and kind of trying to get some solace from Prabhupada's books. I wasn't a good book distributor. I think the best I ever did was like 40 books or something in a day. So I wasn't very good, but I did it for almost a year, and it was lots of suffering, lots of anxiety. I was very also what they used to call fruitive, like always obsessing about the numbers.
Oh yeah.
And course, and really praying, please Nityananda, let me distribute 18 books tomorrow and I'll get 100 this week. It's kind of really
And they read
stupid.
out the scores after the morning
Yeah,
program and
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was lots of stupid things going on, and things that weren't very conducive for anybody's spiritual life, I think. But just the experience of going out there on the street, putting yourself kind of in harm's way in a way, and having to take shelter of the holy name and Prabhupada's books and devotee association as well was very good, because we had a Sankirtan party with a devotee who was a bit senior to the rest of us, and the rest of us were like 18-year-old boys. And we were very serious. It's amazing to think back about it. We never as much as spoke about girls or anything like that. We were really, really serious. Hardly ever thought about things like that. So we were like proper brahmacharis in that sense.
Sure.
And that was a good experience. It was also difficult, like being bossed around, something I wasn't used to. Not having your mom to clean up after you, like these kind of simple things of growing up, was quite good. But in the long run, I also realized that this temple life, even though I really had that idea that I remember coming to the temple and paying dandavats, and another brahmachari had said that when he joined, he said Om Tat Sat. And I thought, wow, that's cool. That now I'm like offering myself, and this is like offering the self. So I did the same. But eventually I realized that maybe I'm not really ready for that. I had so many other things that I was interested in. I wanted to learn more and study, maybe learn Sanskrit and so on. So after about,
when did those kind of desires come up?
they came out already during that first year in the temple. I'm if I think about which am I of the 4 persons who turn to Krishna, I guess I'm the inquisitive person. So I'm a very curious person. I like to learn and study new things, learn something new every day. So after a while, being in the temple started to feel kind of restrictive, and especially in those days, ISKCON Finland was very. It was good in many ways, but it was also quite anti-intellectual. There was not much emphasis on study and things like that.
Sure.
So I blooped basically. I left the temple. I didn't bloop in the sense of like starting to break the principles or things like that, but I blooped in the sense that I left the temple just suddenly and decided that this is too much for me, and that was quite a traumatic experience, because I had joined the temple with this idea that I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life, and when I left the temple, I had the feeling that I failed. This is what I wanted to do, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I remember sometimes seeing in the street where I was walking somewhere, like our Sankirtan van was coming and it's going to pick me up, which was a terrible idea, but also something that would be wonderful. And then I realized, oh, it's just a car that looks the same. So these kind of like flashbacks in a sense. But eventually I reconciled myself to the idea that you can be a devotee of Krishna even though you don't live in the temple. For a very long time, I felt that's kind of a not as good a devotee.
Could you say, how do you think you came upon that realization? Like I had similar experience, and I mean, it was torture, like inside for too long. I started out with this kind of idea. Yes, I'll be a pure devotee, like, really soon. It's just coming. And then as you kind of step down to your comfortable, normal practicing level, but that time it's really difficult to kind of work through that in your mind. And do you have any insight on how you came to those realizations? Or
well, I guess one thing is just to kind of get used to the idea that maybe things can be done in a different way. But another thing is I did get good help from senior devotees in ISKCON at that time. I was aspiring to become a disciple of one ISKCON guru. Eventually, I became his disciple, and he told me that why don't you study religious study? And I remember asking him that, but do you really want me to do that, or are you just saying it to kind of make me feel better? He said, do you trust me? Do you think I would ask you to do that if I didn't want you to do it? And that was a realization for me that, wow, that you can actually please Guru and Gauranga in other ways than going out on Sankirtan.
That's nice.
So that was a good thing. So I started studying religious studies. Then the same person suggested that I should learn also Sanskrit. So I thought, yeah, I actually wanted to do that for a long time, so why not? So I studied that as well.
Had you searched for a guru or a teacher like while you were living in the temple, or was this a relationship that developed after
it developed already in the temple. The main guru of this area of ISKCON was Harikesh Swami in those days. But this was another one. His name was Suhotra Swami. He passed away afterwards. But for several years he was a really good teacher to me, and we didn't have a very close relationship, but he was quite good in many ways, and I really felt that he cared for me. I had an experience when I had my first girlfriend. I was maybe like 24 or something, and it was a short relationship. It ended really badly. I was the bad guy. I basically dumped her because I got scared. Do I need to get married now? And I don't feel I'm ready, and so on. And she told him about this. That do you know that your disciple has been hanging out with me, and now he dumped me. And so she kind of snitched on me, which wasn't so nice at the moment, but it was really good because, of course, then he gave me the sauce for it. But then when he realized that I was also suffering, he got worried, and he even sent one of his disciples to come and just check up on me. I was studying in Sweden at that time, so he sent one disciple from Finland to Sweden to just check up on how is this Måns doing. So that was really nice of him, and I'm eternally thankful for that. But eventually, studying at the university, of course, brought all kinds of challenges to me as well. I had in ISKCON, I had gotten used to a very kind of literalist view on the scriptures and on science, the moon landing, and all of these kind of things. And then getting more familiar with a completely different epistemology, a completely different way of viewing knowledge and where you get knowledge, was a big challenge. Suddenly we have people here saying that the Srimad Bhagavatam is maybe just like 800 years old, it's not 5,000 years old. And so kind of figuring out how to kind of understand all of these things took some time and some effort. And I was helped there by some senior devotees in Sweden in particular. There's one Prabhupada disciple called Ajit Das, who helped me a lot, and another one called Prapujak Das. So I got help from these and other devotees. I also got to know about Guru Maharaj about that time. And here I'm thankful to Nishinga Maharaj, because he had written a blurb. This was the day of the sanga CDs, or the Audarya. I forget what they were called. Audarya audio.
Yeah,
that was
Audarya audio.
And he had written a blurb for an advertisement that Swami B.B. Tripurari represents the authentic Gaudiya tradition. He's the foremost exponent of the authentic Gaudiya tradition in the Western world, or something like that. It sounded really nice. So I sent over, I forget how much, and got 2 CDs, kind of a introduction. One of those CDs was a Gita class, and it was nice, but it wasn't, to be honest, in my estimation at that time, that special. It was maybe like from the 2nd chapter or something. But the other lecture really blew my mind completely, and that was on Vishnu Priya and Mahaprabhu's sannyas. And what really blew me away was, first of all, the emphasis on Gaur Leela, which I'd never really seen before. But mostly it was the way in which Guru Maharaj combined like a deep Siddhantic grounding with so much bhava, with so much feeling for this Leela. And I remember listening to that class again and again and again, just to kind of get this mix of bhava and tattva, which I had never experienced anywhere else. All of this kind of interest in trying to understand Gaudiya Vaishnavism in new ways, and getting inspired by Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Bhagavad speech, and then Guru Maharaj. Really good for me, but it also led me into trouble with ISKCON authorities.
I was wondering about that.
And my ISKCON guru, he didn't appreciate any of this at all. So we kind of grew apart, I guess you could say. Also because I was more stupid then than I am now, and kind of it was difficult for me to appreciate different perspectives. Sure. So I thought I'd figured things out, and the other people were backwards and fundamentalists and so on. So so it was definitely also my fault that this relationship didn't last. But I got to know Guru Maharaj them more through these CDs, and I signed up as a subscriber, and I also got the old ones. So I think I still have the full collection of the Audarya audio.
Yeah,
CD.
we have a bunch of those also. They're so nice.
So I met him for the first time in Copenhagen, Guru Maharaj, in maybe, I forget when that was, maybe 2003 or something like that. He was traveling with Shamsundar. Shamsundar was brahmachari in Saffron those days. I think they were coming back from India, and they were visiting a disciple of Guru Maharaj's in Denmark. So I went over there with one Finnish friend of mine who eventually got initiated as Madhu Mangal Das, and met Guru Maharaj. And that was very, very interesting. I remember he gave a really good talk there in Copenhagen about the gopis, and how when Krishna plays his flute, they all came, and they didn't think about family or organizations or anything like that.
And they found their group there when they got there.
Yeah. But to be honest, I wasn't completely convinced by Guru Maharaj yet at that time. I think maybe I've mentioned it somewhere else, but I thought Guru Maharaj was really puffed up. Because I hadn't really seen a person with the same kind of confidence that he has. I didn't realize what the difference between being puffed up and being confident really is.
Yeah.
And this is partly because of my background as well. Finns are very scared of coming across as being arrogant. So we are very kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I know this. I'm maybe not so good. This is kind of the style here. So somebody who's very kind of, this is how it is. Just because he knows how it is, comes across as somebody who's proud to a Finnish person's eyes. So I wasn't completely convinced by him as a person yet, but I very much liked his teachings. More or less at the same time, or a little bit before actually, I'd also become influenced by another Gaudiya Vaishnava saint, who was Srila Gopananda Bon Maharaj in Vrindavan. When I did my MA thesis in religious studies, I wrote it on Bon Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother Bon Maharaj. And when I did my research for that, I got to know his disciples as well, including the present Acharya, Gopananda Bon Maharaj. And he's an extremely sweet Vaishnava and a wonderful sadhu. And for some time, I was thinking also whether I should take initiation from him. And Guru Maharaj actually told me afterwards he was expecting me to do that. But eventually I decided that no, I want to have a guru who also understands my kind of material background in a way. Like Guru Maharaj, sometimes he gives this example from the Hari Bhakti Vilas that a Kshatriya guru can have Kshatriya disciples and so on. And it does make sense in a way. Gopananda Bon Maharaj, he's a wonderful sadhu, but he lives in a world that is quite different from the world I live in. Guru Maharaj and his sanga, of course, all of you are the perfect fit for me. So I understood that and eventually got initiated by Guru Maharaj in Kamalaksha's house in Finland one winter evening. And from having been Bhrigu Muni Das, I became Bhrigupada Das. And that was also a kind of a transition. I remember I had my old Japamala that I received from my ISKCON guru. I threw it in the Borgo River next to where Kamalaksha lives. And
when I got initiated also, Guru Maharaj told me, take your Japamala and you could throw it in the river. And I was like, that just seems so neat, because I know there's these different ways to bury sacred items or that's fun.
So yeah.
I feel like I remember him saying at some point explaining your name. Can you say anything? Did he
Yes,
did he
yes,
say about your
he,
name, Bhrigupada?
he did. He did. He gave I was the only one who got initiation that day.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave an initiation lecture, which was kind of, I mean, it was for everybody, but he was particularly speaking to me, I felt, because he started out by, he had asked me that can I change your name a little bit? And I said, yes, of course. So he gave a class and he started speaking about the Bhriguvalli of the Taittiriya Upanishad. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, Bhriguvalli Das, that's kind of a strange name. And then he started to speak about Parashuram, Bhrigupati.
Could you explain what the Bhriguvalli is?
It's one part of this Upanishad. It has like Shikshavalli, Bhriguvalli, and so on.
Uh-huh.
Basically means like a chapter or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started to speak about Bhrigupati, Parashuram, and I was still kind of feeling, yeah. And then he started to speak about the story when Bhrigu Muni was sent as the representative of all the other gods to find out which god humans should worship. And he went to Brahma and made Brahma really upset with him. He went to Shiva and Shiva got even more upset. And then he came to Vishnu and he kicked Vishnu in the chest because he was sleeping. Wake up, old man. And Vishnu said, oh, Bhrigu Muni, you have come. I'm sorry, I was napping. I hope you didn't hurt your foot on my hard chest. So we know this story, of course, but Bhrigupada means this footprint that Vishnu has on his chest since then. And Guru Maharaj said that this footprint, it symbolizes Vishnu's tolerance, how he tolerates all of us. So similarly, he was telling to me, similarly, you should always also cultivate this kind of tolerance to others.
Nice.
So I thought, wow, that's an amazing name. I haven't maybe been at that good at that, what he told me to do, but I've been trying at least.
Beautiful. I was interested, do you want to say anything about your first experience of going to India? Because I know you've spent quite a bit of time there, and you have a different perspective than I think a lot of devotees, like, well, at least in my experience of ISKCON, we would go to India frequently, and then we would kind of have the ISKCON window, like a little bit of a bubble of an Indian experience, in the temples, in Vrindavan, in Mayapur, which Mayapur is even more of a bubble. But it sounds like, from what I've heard from you, it seems like you really went kind of in a different, in an academic pursuit, but I'm sure also a devotional pursuit, and you were kind of more free than I ever was, kind of exploring all of these things and learning. So I was just interested if you want to speak about that at all. And
yeah, the first times I went to India, maybe the first 2 times, was quite a bit like this, like you did describe. It's kind of in ISKCON protected version of India. But then later on, especially when I started to do research, I got to know other Vaishnavas, and that was hugely eye-opening for me. In general, this is something I think that is really good for us when we get to know, to kind of see the world in new ways.
mm-hmm.
This is also something that happened to me when I left ISKCON, and together with Kamalaksha and Krishangi, who are my good friends, as you know, and they are wonderful people who are always full of ideas and enthusiasm for new projects.
Mm-hmm.
When I had been in ISKCON, I had been the editor of the kind of, we had a newsletter. So I wanted to do something similar, but something less restricted than that had been. So we got this idea that let's make a yoga journal, like a Finnish yoga journal. And that was really good because it forced us, all of us, to kind of learn how to speak about Krishna consciousness without kind of the lingo, like not using words like the Supreme Personality of Godhead or spiritual planets or three modes of material nature. Like, it's kind of language that we take for granted because we use it all the time, like deities. Nobody knows what a deity is unless they're a member of ISKCON. But we take those words for granted. So having to learn to kind of use new kinds of languages, new ways of explaining things has been really good for me. And getting to know Vaishnavas outside of the kind of styles of Vaishnavas that I knew from before was also in the same way very, very useful. I got married around 2000 or so. That marriage didn't go very well for me. I think it was still partly maybe my karma for having been such a jerk with my first girlfriend. But anyway, my wife, she got into difficulties of her own, and that was quite traumatic for both of us. And eventually, she left me and Radha. So we were on our own with Radha for some years, maybe 4 years or so, and that was being left like that was really difficult for me and very kind of traumatic in one way. Kind of like it felt like my whole future was kind of destroyed, everything I'd thought about life, but also many of the things from the past felt like tainted and kind of I didn't know anymore what to kind of think about life. But it also opened up for some new possibilities, and one was that for a long time I had this idea that I wanted to spend some like proper time in India. So I took Radha and arranged for a leave of absence from my work. So we went to India for 6 months. She was 3 at that time, and so we stayed in Calcutta for 6 months. I rented a house in a middle-class neighborhood. I was studying Bengali, doing research, and had a wonderful time. Living in a place where there were no other white people.
That is quite bold.
Yeah.
To go as a single father with your 3-year-old daughter to India.
I think I had grown a little bit since I'd been that shy little boy.
Yeah, that is not characteristic of.
No, but it was really a good time, and it made me appreciate so many things about Bengali culture that I'd already appreciated from before. I really feel that I have a connection with that culture from maybe a previous life. But it also made me appreciate many things about Finnish culture that I hadn't seen so clearly before, like what a democratic society we have here. For example, with our school system here is that we only have government schools, and everybody goes to a school dependent, not on how rich you are or anything like that, but depending on where you live. So you can have in the same class, you can have somebody whose parents are millionaires, or somebody else whose parents are immigrants, or like that, which is very different from many other places in the world, including India, where society is really kind of segregated on many different lines from very early on. But we had a really nice time there in India, and one of the best things in my life was then a few years afterwards, when by Guru's and Gauranga's grace I had met Saragrahi and started got a new chance in life in a way. We got the opportunity to do the same, all 3 of us. So we were in the same place in Kolkata for another 6 months. So that's one of my favorite places. People have a very kind of grim view of Kolkata often, but it's actually a wonderful city, and there's so many nice Vaishnavas there. It's really easy to live a Vaishnav life there. And I lived a kind of comfortable life there that I've never lived anywhere else. We had a maid who came every morning, and there was a guy who did all the ironing, and there was a boy who brought flowers for puja every morning. So we lived like lords and ladies there. But again, this is the kind of luck or karma I've had in this life, that I've had the opportunity to do things like this. And I feel that this opportunity or this privilege also it also calls for duties and obligations, and I'm trying to share some of this luck with other devotees as well. I wrote in that little biography that Archana Siddhi asked me to write, that I've been practicing Krishna consciousness with little success. And that is very true. I'm not being humble or anything like that, because I'm not a very humble person. I'm just being honest. If I compare myself with what I expected when I was 18, I would have been completely disappointed. That after 30 years, this guy is still such a materialist. But I do have one thing that I think is, I don't know if it's because of the sadhana or if it's because of something else, and that is that I like to serve devotees. So maybe that's something that can help me in the future.
And it is helping you. We can see. As we finish up, do you think there's anything? What would you say is the most profound change that you have seen in yourself over the course of your devotional life, taking to this path? And are there any lessons you'd like to share specifically?
Well, most of the things I've learned, as I maybe said already, I've learned kind of by the school of hard knocks. The best teachings have been the most painful ones, like being left alone with a little daughter. That was really, really painful, and I really hope it doesn't happen to anybody else. But it taught me so many different things. And like, for example, when I was an 18-year-old brahmachari, in one way I was really Krishna conscious, but I was also a completely obnoxious person. I remember standing and doing dishes, washing the dishes, and the temple pujari, a lady, she was walking past me with some offering plate or something, and the edge of her sari was touching the edge of my dhoti, and I was so upset in my mind about this terrible woman who dares touch my dhoti with the edge of her sari. Really puffed up and really obnoxious, and not a nice person, and not a very nice person towards another Vaishnava. So I think failing in Krishna consciousness can really be good sometimes in the long run. I'm really happy that I didn't stay a brahmachari any longer than that, if that was the kind of result that it brought me. So I think we shouldn't be scared of we shouldn't become too kind of depressed when we find out that things aren't going the way we were expecting. I trust that Krishna has a plan for all of us, and we can learn from these kind of. I'm not saying that we should go in for failing, or now let's go out and break all the principles or anything like that. But sometimes these things can be good in the long run, even the seen failures.
Yeah, and I think that's really what this series is about. And I really have great appreciation for. I think it says a lot about your character, as that you have this perspective to be able to look back on things that have happened in your life and learn. I mean, it's as we all get older, you get some perspective, and it's a wonderful thing. But I really appreciate the looking back on these things and seeing there was actually some really good things that happened out of these difficulties. And Archana City and I, we talk about this all the time. This is why we love these interviews, because it's so confirming to hear people have these experiences, and we know that they've grown. I mean, they're here doing these interviews. We're all practicing devotees, and people have grown through these struggles, and it's really a beautiful thing, because nobody's perfect. That's pretty boring.
Yeah.
So
yeah, one thing I was thinking about when kind of mentally preparing for this was that, having heard many of the other interviews, I really like this series, and the terrible struggles that many have gone through, like Maharha and other senior devotees and others as well, the kind of difficulties they've had. I was kind of feeling shy that can I even like mention my little things. But then I remember something that I heard the Dalai Lama say. I met him once, and he was quite kind of an impressive person in his way. And he said one thing that stuck with me, and that was that when he went to school as a little boy, when he had already been chosen to be the Dalai Lama, he went to school together, or to class together with his brother. And the teacher was a very strict disciplinarian. So he had a stick. And whenever any of the boys in the class would make a mistake, he would beat them with the stick. But he actually had two sticks. He had one wooden stick for the ordinary boys, and then he had one gold-plated wooden stick with which he would beat the Dalai Lama. But he said, golden stick or wooden stick, it hurt the same. So everybody's kind of experience of suffering is suffering. That even if somebody is saying that I suffered so much because I didn't get my bubble gum today, we might think that what a frivolous thing that is. But if that person is suffering, that's suffering. Suffering is suffering. You can't kind of quantify it. It's always something subjective. So thinking of that, I thought maybe I can share my things as well.
Yeah, I was thinking along those lines, but it's a beautiful example. So thank you very much for coming here and sharing your story. We want to ask does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Bhrigupada Prabhu? No way, Sakirati and Shani. Just one sec. Let me, you can unmute Sakirati.
Pranam, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And I wanted to ask if you can say something about Sadhbush, your day.
Thank you. Yes, I would love to say something about him. He came into my life almost 26 years ago. I wasn't initiated at that time yet, but I was interested in Murti Seva. I really had that interest already from before Krishna Consciousness. I remember making some kind of clay image in school and then trying to dress it with paper or something like that. There's some kind of instinct for this. So I asked my ISKCON guru that could I start worshiping an image, and he said, yes, you could worship Sharbhuj. And I had said that I was going to Vrindavan for Vrajmandal Parikrama. And he said, in Vrindavan, you can get a Sharbhuj Murti, a small Sharbhuj Murti, and you can worship him. So I went to Vrindavan, to Vrajmandal Parikrama, and I was praying the whole Parikrama that, please, Krishna, come to my house. And you know how they say that the dust of Vrindavan fulfills all your desires. So then afterwards I went to one store in Loy Bazaar and asked for a Shadbhuj Murti, and they showed me a Murti. I will give you darshan here.
Jai.
Sadhu Mahaprabhu ki jai.
Jai.
And he's kind of big. He's like this, more or less. But I thought Maharaj had said small, and he was small compared to a life-size image. Afterwards, I never saw such a big Shadbhuj Murti anywhere in ISKCON. But I thought he was small, so and he wanted to come with me to Finland, so I've been worshiping him since then, and that's been one of the best things in my life. There's really two. I'm really bad at doing japa, for example. I do it every day, but the number of good rounds that I've done in my life is not many. It's probably like one a year or something. But there's 2 times when I focus, like properly focus. One is when I'm teaching, and the other one is when I'm doing Murti Seva. So
Nice.
So that's something that I'm really thankful to, and I'm really thankful also to Saragrahi, because she's a wonderful wife in so many ways, and also in the worship of Shadbhuj. Usually I'm the one who's doing the arati and things like that, but she's supporting me in so many different ways, also when it comes to the worship of Shadbhuj. So I'm really lucky like this.
Was there a particular attraction to this form, or?
Well, Suhotra Swami, who recommended me to worship Shadbhuj, he liked Shadbhuj. So he gave that recommendation, and I kind of took that yeah, this is a wonderful form, and eventually, of course, I became very attached to him. So I see him as Mahaprabhu in this particular form, and he has been very merciful to me in many ways. I'm not a very kind of mystical person, which has been a source of grief for myself. I've always been envious of persons who have like beautiful visions and cry and roll on the ground. It's like that. I don't. I'm a boring person. But with Shadbhuj, I've had some really like wonderful experiences.
Beautiful. So was that Akura Prabhu? Okay, I'm not sure if everybody is hearing correctly, or okay, go for it. Yeah. We'll give you a minute.
And maybe you can also repeat the questions, because the people on Facebook and on YouTube, they want to hear what Akrura said.
Okay, so the first question was about going into university. What kind of mindset should you have to kind of protect you in this new environment? And the second question was about Vaishnava marriage. Is it important that your partner is also a Vaishnava, or is it not so important? Show me with your hand, Akrura, then when you want me to start to answer. Okay, so first question about university. I think the main thing going into university or going into any kind of new stage of life, especially if it's a challenging one, really is association. That was what helped me. Before going to the university, one Prabhupada disciple told me that you have to go in there with a mission, that you have to kind of keep in your heart this mission that I'm going to smash those atheists. I realized already when he said it that will not work for me. I will not be able to smash anybody except maybe myself. So more than that, I think it's important to have good association, people that you can speak with and kind of share your thoughts with, and also to have a good sadhana. I think this is something that we neglect sometimes. We might even think that it's more important to kind of know things, that as long as I kind of understand the tattva, then everything is fine. But I actually think that it's more important that you do things the right way, that you have doesn't have to be like a 5-hour sadhana every day, but like a steady sadhana that you do every single day with no breaks. Maybe not exactly the same things every day, but at least that you have this kind of grounding. Then you'll be able to also kind of go through changes in life. So that's what I would answer to the first question. To the second question, I would say, since you're asking me, I can only speak from my own experience. I think it's extremely important that your partner is a Vaishnava, because this is something that is that's a wonderful thing about Vaishnava marriage, that when two Vaishnavas live together, regardless of whether they are man and woman or man and man or whatever, you have a chance to make your family life really about Krishna's family. Like Bhaktivinoda is singing in that song, Krishnera Shangshara Koro Chori Anachar. Do Krishna's family, Krishner Shangshar. Make your family about Krishna. So when you have a family where your spouse is a Vaishnava, your children are Vaishnavas, when you're serving your wife, which of course every husband is doing to the best of his understanding and ability, he's trying to serve his wife, then you're serving a Vaishnava. And when the wife is serving the husband, as the wife also will do, she's serving a Vaishnava. So it's not that you have your spiritual life and your family life and they are somehow different things. It's the same thing. You're serving the Vaishnava. It also makes it a very grave thing, because when you're shouting at your wife and being mean with her, you're doing Vaishnava Parad. So it's a grave thing, but it's also a wonderful thing. And this is an important thing, I think. Of course, you can be a devotee being married to a non-devotee, and there are super good examples of that as well. But it's much more difficult. I know Indians who have like spouses that are non-devotees, and like Vaishnava wives who cook non-vegetarian food for their non-Vaishnava husbands, or vice versa. So you can have all kinds of situations, and it can work probably super good as well. But from my own experience, I'm saying that I think that it's important that both are Vaishnavas. We can't expect the other person to be a pure Vaishnava if we are not ourselves. So that's too much to ask, but some kind of Vaishnava, that will be really important, I think.
Yeah, wonderful. Does anybody else?
Yeah, I'll put it here in the chat.
And it looks like there is maybe a question in Spanish in the chat. Yes, please.
Yes, that was important that he did. I would still have gone to university in the other way. If he hadn't said that, I'd still have done that. It was kind of the obvious choice for me. But I would probably not have been able to kind of as seamlessly connect that with Krishna consciousness as I did. I mean, I studied religious studies, but I specialized in Vaishnavism very, very early on, and I have the very lucky situation now where I can work and research Vaishnavism, like I'm doing this Hari Bhakti Vilasa project, and get paid for that. So that's a wonderful thing, and it was partly because of the encouragement of Sohatra Swami, and then afterwards, of course, Guru Maharaj. He's also been super encouraging to me to do these kind of things, and I've always felt that he accepts me for who I am. How did I harmonize these two things? Well, I think at first what I did was I thought that I really resonated with what Guru Maharaj speaks about absolute and relative aspects of spirituality, that some things are relative, and the things that I couldn't kind of wrap my head around, like Prabhupada's way of speaking about the moon landing, or I remember wondering about the atoms of the third canto in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I could kind of think, well, this is a relative thing. I don't need to believe in this if I can't. I can still be a devotee. Later on, I maybe changed my thinking a little bit on those things, become, I think, a bit more humble, and realizing that maybe I don't need to understand everything. Maybe some things are too big for this little Bhrigupada does. And I don't need to think that this is a relative thing that is bound by time and place, and now we understand better how atoms work or something like that. But at that point, that was a necessary thing for me to kind of keep my faith in the big picture. So that was one thing, kind of differentiating between the relative and the absolute. And then later on, realizing really that I don't need to understand everything. So I don't know if that helps, but those were some of the things.
Jai, nice answer. So as far as I can tell, that's all of the questions, and it is getting a little bit late. But I wanted to thank you, Bhrigupada Prabhu, for coming here and giving us your association. Thank you, Akrura Prabhu, for interpreting. Nice, also asking nice question. Thank you all for being here and giving all of your association. And next week will be Brajasundari, and Archana City will be back. Haribol.
Haribol, thank you for having me. Haribol, everybody. Dandavad. Hare Krishna.